This time of year can be so super stressful with heaps going on, and all of this can really add to our mental load. But I want the new year to feel like a fresh start. So that I can enter 2025 as cool, calm, and collected as possible, let's do a mental declutter and reset together. Our first step is really just asking ourselves, what priorities do we have for the reset? Because this is a mental reset, it's really about getting cool, calm, and collected in our mental space. So things like getting clear on what we need to do, whether that's this year or next, thinking about things like reflection, goal setting, and getting ourselves in the best headspace possible to enter the new year. The priorities that I've specified for myself is clarity on my need to-dos, doing my reflection for the year past, getting clear on my wants for next year, also getting excited about the year ahead, and preparing for action taking. Whatever your purpose for the reset is totally fine. I just find that starting with these priorities or the purpose means that I can be intentional about what action steps I choose to include in the reset. In terms of those action steps, in this video we're going to be doing a mind unwind or brain dump. We're going to look at doing reflection for the year gone, considering my goal setting for next year and the steps involved in that, writing a list of any of my mental health admin tasks that I want to do, or any actions I can take before the new year outside of this specific page to help get me in the best headspace before we reach 2025, and then also write down my keep, stop, and start lists. Depending on the purpose that you give for your reset, whether it be a mental reset or otherwise, the action steps that you include might look a little bit different. For instance, if it's not so much a mental health reset, it could be a just general health reset. Maybe you'd want to consider some of the physical health routines or habits that you're building. Your reset could include things like intentional guided meditation. It could include going through your social media apps and getting rid of any of the accounts that just aren't really bringing you joy into your life. I personally consider that to be part of my digital space reset, but it can have a very big impact on our mental landscape as well. Once the steps were written out though, then it was time to take action. And the first step that I'm doing is a mind unwind. This could also be called a brain dump or a just mental declutter, I suppose, but that's what I'm kind of calling this entire process, so I'm going with a mind unwind. But this is effectively where we try and take all of the thoughts in our head and get them onto paper. Now, depending on how many thoughts you have swimming around in your head, you might need more space than I have here. This spread in particular I've set up at the back of my journal as part of my kind of end of year planning space. So it has this layout. It also has space for my yearly reset and the tasks that I'm going to do for that. Any social events that I was planning for the last 3-month period of the year. A space to plan out our Vlogmas content and all the videos going up on the channel in December. And then also a space to plan out all of my 2025 journals and the setups that I was going to be doing in those. This mental reset that we're doing is kind of a staple in my end of year process. So I already knew ahead of time that I could go in and put in the different sections that we have, and that I would probably be able to get away with a mind unwind brain dump space of this size. But as said, this is just me trying to get any kind of tasks mainly out of my head and onto paper so I can think about which of these I can do before the year is over. Some of them will just be smaller things that I can realistically do this week, or maybe I do every week, whereas others might end up becoming future me problems or things that I have to do next year or I want to take action on at a later point. The reason that I like to start my mental declutter here is because oftentimes these are things I'm ruminating on. They're just going around and around and around in my head, taking up mental space and energy that I could be using on other things. For instance, doing my reflection for my goals, setting new goals for the next year. If I have this kind of background process in my head, just trying to think through all of these other little kind of life admin things I have to do, it'll steal my attention away from the deep work that I want to do for those other mental areas. What you can use to make your brain dump or mind unwind as thorough as possible is something like a trigger list or a spark list. This is effectively a list of different categories or considerations that you can have in your various life areas, and they can help just jog your memory or bring things to the front of your mind so that you can note them down. I didn't end up using mine for this list, but what I did write on here is that I want to do another mind unwind when we get to pretty much the last couple of days in the year. In that one, I will be doing a very thorough job to make sure I have done a big brain sweep before we get to the new year. Once the mind unwind was done though, then it's time to think about reflection and goal setting. Now I've put these two together in one list in this space called reflection steps. because it's effectively reflecting on the things that have happened and then reflecting on the things that I would like to happen. I list these in the order that I will actually end up doing them. So for instance, when it comes to looking back on the past quarter, because I do my goal setting quarterly, I like to start out by listing my goals so that I have kind of a focus list to go with. And I also like to consider any other projects that have been taking up my time and attention that have kind of stolen focus from my goals, mainly so that when I kind of get to the end of the quarter, I'm like, oh gosh, I didn't get as much work on these goals done as I would have liked. I can then say, yeah, but you did all of this stuff. I always like to start with the positive, so then I go on to thinking about my wins and achievements in those project and goal areas. And I also like to write down any challenges I faced, because it's good to honor the fact that those challenges happened. We don't so much want to dwell on them, but having the acknowledgement that they did occur means that we can better plan for next time they might come up. Rather than just listing the challenges, I also like to think about any approaches that I had, whether they be positive or not so positive, effectively just thinking about which ones helped and which ones hindered my progress on my goals. One of the final reflective steps when looking back is just considering any lessons that I learned about myself as a goal getter, about any kind of tactics that work well for me, and any information I can take forward with me into the next quarter so that I can start planning my goals for that one. The actual goal planning is something I'm very excited to get into. I've only just started touching on it, but we can cross off the reflective steps that I've already done at this stage. The next step was to think about any of the other tasks that I could do to help get me in the best mental place before we move into the new year. As mentioned, one of these is going to be an end of year brain dump or mind sweep or mind unwind, mainly because in doing the one we've got here, this is being actioned at about the halfway through December point. So there's still a couple weeks left until we get to the new year, and I want my fresh slate to feel as fresh as possible. Depending on how you like to care for your mental health, your task list might look a little different to mine. Some of the things that I have on here are scheduling time off for the new year, so having those days planned in advance so that I actually take time off. It's doing a full declutter of my house, because even though that's not technically mental, like it's not in my head, it is something that causes mental stress. I don't like having a bunch of clutter in my house, so intentionally having time at the end of the year to get them out of my house would be a good idea. I also want to write myself an unfinished list, so things that I have started this year but they're not quite wrapped up with. I am notoriously bad at starting projects and not finishing them, so as part of this I want to think about anything that I could get neatly wrapped up and done before we get to 2025, making that less of a future me problem and more of a current me project. One of my mental health tasks is just migrating into my new journals. That always fills me with a lot of joy, a lot of satisfaction, and also just makes me feel good mentally knowing what's happening when I've got all of my ducks in a row and I can hit the ground running for the new year. Let me know what kind of tasks you do to support your mental health, whether that be in the sense of like a mental reset like we're doing here or just in general. But the next step is to consider my keep, stop, and start lists. This is actually something that I typically like to do as part of my goal setting, but oftentimes for that I'm looking at my wider life areas, not just my mental space. When I'm thinking about the keep section, this is stuff that I'm already doing or already doing to some extent, and I want to double down on that or keep going with the same extent that I'm already doing it, just depending on the task. So for instance, for me, that's stuff like doing my mind unwinds or brain dumps. I find that my daily logging and daily scheduling has been really beneficial for me this year. Actually having time off from work, that would be something I would like to do more of next year, because I did do some of it this year, not as much as I probably would have liked. And also having my reset weeks at the end of every quarter, which effectively is just a time to give myself that fresh slate feeling for the next quarter. By having them sprinkled throughout the year, it means that I get that fresh slate feeling at multiple points. In terms of the stop list, this is a list of things that I would like to do less of, so effectively bad mental health habits, or things that just don't support my mental health in the way that I would like to be supporting it. For instance, when I'm doing my goal setting, having such a focus on work-related goals, I would very much like to have goals set in other life areas, ones that I actually focus on and achieve. I find I struggle a lot more with goal getting in other life areas. I find that often I put off building health-related habits, and that's something I'd like to address. And also this year, it seemed that I did a lot of letting my work pile up. I'm mainly in particular thinking about the budgeting there. And I literally have a pile of receipts staring at me while I do this voiceover. But in terms of the start list, this is populated with things that I'm not really doing currently. I may have very slightly started on them, but not to an extent where I can say that I should keep doing the thing. One of the things in particular that I'm hoping to start doing next year is not working after dinner, like kind of as a baseline or as a rule. This year and previously, working after dinner has kind of just been the default, but I'd like to be a little bit more rigid with myself about not having that happen, mainly as a way to get more leisure into my schedule, and also it will likely force me to make better use of the time that I have during the day. I have definitely found a lot of success with time restricting this year, so saying to myself, no, you don't have the full day to get this video done, you have 2 hours only, and it still happens, and still to a good extent. Essentially, it's just a way to help me battle my perfectionism and also just reclaim my time. I find this mental reset process at the end of the year so super helpful for just getting cool, calm, and collected for the year ahead. And let me know if you end up doing any of these tasks as part of your end of year wrap up. I hope you find it as helpful as I do. One of the best tools that I have for this mental decluttering process though is a prompt list for my mind unwinding. This has been one of the most helpful tools for getting things out of my head and onto paper, and you might want to make one for yourself. To find out more about that super helpful list, this video is the next one to check out. We'll talk about what it is, how you can make your own one, and also how to use it, so click or tap on that video and I'll see you over there.